It seems like just about every year there's a new get-rich-quick scheme somehow involving real estate, and lately it's been no different. There has been a huge rise in the sub-to, or also called the subject-to offer scam. And yes, I am actually calling it a scam, and I can just hear people typing on the keyboards already, and I'm ready for your angry comments. If you don't know me, my name is Frank Kritzman. I'm a real estate agent on the Emerald Coast of Florida, and I want to be what I wish I had when I was starting out as a real estate agent. I used to be Air Force EOD for about a decade, and I've been full-time in real estate for the last 3. Anyways, let's get right into it. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what the sub-to or subject-to scam is, how exactly it works, and how it could have very long-lasting negative effects, not only on your reputation as a real estate agent, but for your sellers as well. And I don't know how the representation works in your state, but here in my state in Florida, we are supposed to be a fiduciary for your client, which means that you are supposed to have your client's best interest at heart whenever you're advising them to make decisions. And yes, just to reiterate, I am calling this whole sub-to thing a scam. Now, just because I'm saying it's a scam doesn't mean that it's not legal, because it absolutely is legal to do the whole sub-to or subject-to offer thing. But it can also be a scam and be legal. The definition of a scam is just a dishonest scheme, and that's exactly what I'm saying it is. Now, before you go down in the comments and start roasting me and get all angry and fired up, which I'm sure some of you are already doing, I just want you to hear me out on this. I'm sure that there are some people, there's probably a lot of people who are doing the whole sub-to, subject-to offer thing, who are perfectly legitimate and have great intentions. I see videos on social media of this all the time where the person will be talking to the seller and they will be, I don't know if they just don't know about what the closing costs actually are, but they will be misleading, or I don't know if it's dishonest or just ignorant, but they will not tell the truth about what the closing costs might actually be had they use a real estate agent. And so they'll use these overinflated numbers to tell the seller what their expenses would be to try and get them to accept this potentially lower offer that this person is offering them with the sub-to. The reason that I know this is happening for a fact is because I get calls almost daily on my active listings. I get multiple calls per week from people who they say they're investors, and first they start asking some questions about the property, and then they start asking questions about seller financing, and they kind of all go down the same path. I can almost pick up the script immediately. I haven't done some searching around to see who's kind of leading the charge on pushing out the scripts, but from what I've seen on the receiving end of these calls, it seems like there's like a big script, probably some YouTuber is pushing out there, and all these people are following this script, and I'm the one that's getting the calls on these listings. Let me just pump the brakes for a quick second and rewind and explain how the whole subject-to thing works. So here's the ultimate goal. If you do accept one of these sub-to, subject-to offers, here's what would happen. That homeowner that's selling their house, they would sign over the deed to their house, and that person, the buyer, they basically are just agreeing to start making the payments on the seller's mortgage. So that original mortgage that's on the house for the seller, that mortgage doesn't actually get paid off, and it doesn't even transfer hands. It's actually still in the name of the seller, and the buyer gets legal ownership of the home through the transfer of the title, and then they're just basically saying contractually that they're going to keep making the mortgage payments on the house on behalf of the seller. And the goal is they want to get a renter in there that not only covers the mortgage, but then gets a little bit extra over the mortgage. So now they have a little bit of passive income as long as they can keep renters in that property. Oftentimes, these sub-to or subject-to buyers will agree to pay for closing costs. They'll even sometimes pay a little bit, like give an upfront lump sum check to pay the seller's equity that they may have built up. And they even agree to pay real estate commissions, which is very important to bring up and just a matter of perspective from a confliction standpoint. Let's say, hypothetically, I'm selling a house. I'm a real estate agent. I have a house listed. In one hand, I have a subject to offer. And in the other hand, I have a traditional offer written on a purchase contract with conventional financing. For me personally, whichever one the seller picks, my paycheck is going to be exactly the same. And I say that to say I have no skin in the game in either direction for me personally, going one over the other. I'm just looking out for what is best for the seller. So here's where the bad part comes in. Remember a little bit earlier when I was saying that the mortgage actually doesn't get paid off and that mortgage stays in the old owner's name and that new company is just agreeing to make the mortgage payments. So like I said in the very beginning, I'm sure there are some people that are out there doing this whole SubTo thing that have great intentions, and maybe they do have, they have every intention to keep with their word and just keep making those payments over time. But I just find it very, very hard to believe that every single one of these people running this whole SubTo thing has every intention of making these payments for the next 20, 25 years. Like, you're still going to be running this scheme in 20, 25 years. To me, it just kind of sounds silly when you call them out on the phone. Like, I've called a lot of these guys out on the phone while they're talking to me, and they get upset at me. And I had one even hang up on me, which was pretty hilarious. So this is where the very bad part comes in for the seller. That mortgage stays in their name. 4 months goes down the road and the tenants suddenly stop paying rent, right? This hypothetical situation. In that situation, that new owner of the house, you think they're just going to keep making the payments on that house when they're not getting a rent check in? Maybe they will, right? But if they don't, whose credit gets messed up? The previous owner, because that's who's holding the risk, that's who's holding the mortgage. So will that new owner who has the house, who's running the whole SubTo, subject to thing, they don't really get affected in any way other than they don't get that payment. But that previous seller, they have that missed mortgage payment on their credit. And it's also going to affect their DTI, right? That's another thing that a lot of people aren't taking into consideration, is that later on, if that seller wants to go get a loan for something else, that's still going to be on their credit report. I don't know how that's going to work with credit reporting and being able to claim that rental revenue as income. I don't know how it's going to work, but it's definitely not going to look good for DTI if they want to get a loan later on down the road. In my opinion, it's just bad news. There's just way too much risk involved. And here's where the whole scam thing comes into play. I think that those long-term risks aren't being fully, like the SubTo people, not all of them, maybe some of them are, but I think that a lot of them are not being fully transparent with those risks long-term. And that's been evident with a lot of stories that I've heard recently. There was one that I shared on my personal Facebook page recently that originally came from someone in a real estate mastermind group that I'm in. They said that their seller should accept one of these SubTo offers. 6 months down the road, there's been 3 missed payments so far, and the seller's credit has just been absolutely tanked, and they don't own the home anymore, right? They signed away the rights to their home, but they still have the mortgage that somebody that's hanging in someone else's balance, right? That someone else has the responsibility. Well, I mean, ultimately, it's the seller's responsibility to pay the mortgage. But it's just a bad situation. So that situation, 6 months down the road, 3 missed payments, they wanted to hire a lawyer or something, try to figure out some way to get out of that agreement because already it was just terrible for them. And that situation right there is why I'm bringing this up with all you real estate agents and why you guys need to be having this talk with your sellers if something like this comes in, and strongly advise that they do not take it. I have another friend who is basically in this same exact situation. He's a real estate agent. They were sitting on the market for a long time, feeling a little, I wouldn't say desperate, but they were, let's just say, excited about any offer that came along, right? So this SubTo offer came along. They had an investor person reach out to them to take this offer. And now months down the road, the seller has doesn't own the home anymore, but they still have that debt, and that company is not making the payments on the house. The previous owner's credit is taking a huge dive, and my friend, the real estate agent that sold the house, how do you think that looks, right? How do you think as a seller, how do you think they feel about their real estate agent who suggested that they take this offer just so they could get that check, right? And this is just such a very bad situation to be in, and I do not want that for any of you, and I definitely do not want that. Like I said, I get these calls all the time on properties that I'm selling. I had a house that I actually closed on recently where I was getting every single day, I was getting calls, and this house was on the market for 45, 50 days before we got an offer. So I wanted an offer bad. My seller wanted an offer bad, but I was like, look, man, it is not worth the risk. It's not worth taking the risk on one of these people. Just don't do it. Let's just wait it out. We made some changes to the house, and we eventually did get a real offer and got it under contract, got it sold. Seller's happy. It's a great day. So then the last question for all you real estate agents out there is, how do we protect ourselves from being in this situation? How do we protect our sellers? Very, very simple. All you have to do is ask one question. Now, if you're a more seasoned agent, you're going to be able to spot this very easily, right? But for a newer agent, it might be a little harder to spot. So here's what you need to ask if an investor type is calling you and trying to figure out one of these deals. So what you want to ask is, when that person says, hey, are they interested in creative financing or some nonsense like that? What you want to find out is, hey, when this thing closes at the closing table, is this offer going to result in my seller's mortgage being paid off? So if they say yes, well, then that means they either are doing cash or some kind of financing to pay off that mortgage and get your seller out of that situation. If they say no, the seller's still going to have that mortgage after closing, well, then that means your ears should be perking up and you should be looking a little bit more skeptical at the situation and trying to get all the details. Now, I'm just going to caveat this out there. There are situations where seller financing does work to the benefit of both parties, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say that seller financing is never a good idea. But for the average consumer, everyday homeowner, this type of seller financing situation is not anything they want to be near. And just make sure you fully convey all the risks and the potential downsides to your sellers when you're having these conversations. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any questions or comments, make sure you go down and put them in the comments section below. And if you have any questions about joining EXP, you can hit me up and you can ask me a question about that as well. Definitely one of the best decisions I ever made. I wish I would have joined sooner. It's great. They leave me alone. If I get in an argument with another agent, I can tell them, well, why don't you just call my broker? And that is easier said than done. So I wouldn't have it any other way. I love it there. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.